Hello, it's me, not SoloMission, who definitely doesn't have hay fever and definitely isn't feeling drowsy after taking one too many hay fever tablets. But there's no time for sleeping because guess what? Oh my god, we've got new prayers again. Again, guys, for the 5th time in 5 months. But why should you care about these new prayers? Well, they've just changed considerably, and I think this is the final round of prayers before they get polled to the players to go into the game forever as a reward from Desert Treasure 2. And more importantly, look, I can actually use them because we are on a beta world right now. Forget everything you knew about the old new prayers, if that makes sense. I will show you what is up with the new prayers. Now, there have been changes made today. First of which is we have protect item on this prayer book. Why? Because we can't live without it, apparently. So we've got that. We have the protection prayers, which also now protect you from 100% of incoming damage for that style, which have exactly the same functionality as protect prayers on the regular prayer book. So these are very familiar. There is one difference because these are called Dampened prayers, which means that if I am using Dampened melee and I get attacked with range, say someone would have hit me a 10 with range, they would now hit an 11 because I take 10% more damage if I'm praying against the wrong style. So still some sort of drawback, not massive drawback, but we'll move on. Rebuke has also changed. It still functions pretty much the same. It's increasing recoil damage by 50%. That is Ring of Recoils and Vengeances. So say if my Vengeance would have hit a 10, it now hits a 15. Vindication, we've changed this so it functions exactly the same as Redemption. Why? Because we can't live without the old prayer book. And then we've got Decimate, Annihilate, and Vaporize, which are essentially the same, better versions of Piety, Rigor, and Augury. They are around 5% better than their counterparts, however, offer no defense. So these are pretty similar to how they were in the old new prayers, but in the new prayers, they are a little bit nerfed. So down from 30% to 27% strength. Same with range, and the mage, I think, remains unchanged. We've also got brand new vows here. Fumus's vow. Who knows how that works? I've tried to get to this to work. I still don't really understand what's going on there. Umbra's vow, which is reducing your opponent's defense by 5% of the damage you deal, up to 15%. So it's a bit of a leech in a way. You gradually are reducing defense. Big fan of that one. Up to 15%, which is quite considerable for, say, a monster has 500 defense. Then what? You're draining a maximum of quick math 75 defense levels. That's quite a lot. And then Craw's vow behaves kind of like the Keris Partisan of the Sun. So when you kill an enemy, you'll gain 3 hit points at the cost of 3 prayer points, if you guys know how that weapon works. It's pretty similar to this. I like this a lot better than trying to bring in some form of soul split. I think it's more balanced. And then we've got Glacy's vow, which reduces your opponent's magic by 5%, up to 15%. So essentially, it's the magic equivalent of this one over here. It's a gradual drain for your opponent over time. And then the last change that we have from the old new prayers in the new prayers is the addition of intensifier. Now this replaces Gambit. Gambit used to be an overhead. This is a underhead. I don't know, that's not really a thing, is it? A non-overhead, which increases your accuracy with all styles by 40%. So that's a lot, considering Piety increases your accuracy by 20%, Decimate increases it by 25%. However, it's worth noting you can't have these on at the same time. You can't stack them for 65%. However, you can stack these two, so you can have draining defense and incredible accuracy. I think this one is just there for people that hate missing their Dragon Warhammer specs and maybe a few other niche scenarios. Now, there's more in-depth reasoning and thought behind the prayers in the blog. I will link that in the description, but I don't want to go too deep into that. I want to talk about the prayer book overall and how the changes affect things and what we're thinking, because we're going to have to decide and vote on these prayers. Now, other changes include that they've reduced the drain rate of prayers. It's now way less punishing, more in line with the regular prayer book. And they've also given the green light to the prayer reorder plugin. Now, if you don't know what this was a plugin that was allowed up until 2019 on Runelight, and then it was banned by Jagex. But they're bringing it back where you can essentially drag prayers wherever you want them in your prayer book. Typically, I used to use this, say if I was PKing on a pure and I wanted to move Eagle Eye to where Rigger was because I was more used to Rigger. I found that very useful. Or if you don't want to move your mouse, you can put all the prayers you're using in a small box where your gear is. I think it's good quality of life, and to get used to new prayers would be very weird and frustrating, I think, for players. So I think that's the correct move. So do we want new prayers? Do we need new prayers? How different are the new prayers to the old prayers? I'd actually argue at this stage, they're not really that different to each other. I think the new prayer book is just a direct upgrade of the old prayer book, and they function pretty similarly. The prayer drain rate is pretty similar from new to old. You can flick the new prayers, you can flick the old prayers. That change has been gone for a while now. A lot of the functionality is the same. You have these combat boosting prayers, you have these combat boosting prayers, you have these protection prayers, which protect from 100% of damage, as they do on the regular prayer book. And this prayer book, I think, is a result of, we actually just quite like the current prayer book, and it works quite well because the whole game has been designed around the current prayer book. It's not really, like, who could have seen this coming, right? It's, yeah. we like our current prayers, and that's reflected in these prayers that we've ended up with here. To go through them all one by one, we've got Rejuvenation, which recharges your hit points faster, as we have on the old prayer book. We've got the lesser prayers here, which is 20%, just like lesser prayers here. Protect item just being added. We literally have protect item over here. This is a genuinely new one. We have 100% protection from all incoming damage, as we do on the old prayer book. And I know there's 10% from other styles, but outside of PvP, there are a few PvM scenarios which actually would mean that you're taking significantly more damage using these dampened prayers. And you've got to remember, you're increasing your DPS, so you're killing things faster. So you're taking more damage but killing things faster. Maybe you end up with the same result but just quicker in terms of supplies used and all the rest of it. Trinitas is something genuinely new, although it is a boost across multiple stats. Berserker, that is just preserve. Smite, or purge it's called. It's called smite over here. The number is slightly different. Metabolize, that's a new prayer. Rebuke, that's a new prayer. Vindication, we've just changed that to be exactly the same as Redemption. We have all the combat boosting prayers. Yes, they don't have any defensive element like Piety and Rigor and Augury do. However, they function very similarly. You just turn them on. It's not an overhead prayer. They give a significant damage buff for no defense. However, I'd argue you're barely using defense when you're playing this game, to be honest. It's all about damage, and these prayers are what makes this book worth using everywhere in the game when you combine them with this set of protection prayers. We then have the vows, which are genuinely new. Then we have Retribution, but it's level 91 prayer and does slightly more damage. In Wrath, that's just the same. And then Intensifier is something that's genuinely new, but it is also just a stat buff. So when I boiled it down, these prayers are what are new, really. We get extra damage from the new Annihilate, Vaporize, all those sort of prayers, like 5% more damage, which is a lot. It's a big increase in DPS. Lose a bit of defense, but when has defense ever mattered in this game? It barely matters. You just got to remember that. So a blanket DPS boost. We're going to be using this prayer book everywhere. It's not going to be like spell books that you're constantly swapping between. Once you go to this one, you're probably not going to go back, let's be honest. And then these are the new prayers on top of just getting a DPS boost. 3 of them are to do with accuracy increases. Yeah, there's an interesting one here in terms of the blood. The Fumus one, I swear this shit doesn't work. Maybe my reading comprehension is in the bin, but I just can't get this thing to seem like it's working at all. More reflection, you can eat some hard food faster, you can combo 15% into 3, and you can use prayer points to run energy. Is this enough to justify bringing out a new prayer book? Personally, I think the old prayer book does its job, and I don't think we need to have a massive DPS increase from a new one with no real change to how the game is played, how PvM's done. It's going to be largely the same because the prayer books are incredibly similar. But maybe that's the point, and that's what people want. I think if we're doing that, we just don't need to bother adding it. Like, look at the old prayers. I just like the style of them more. They look nicer. That's just like, that's RuneScape right there to me. So the nostalgia part of me is against this. The content creator in me is definitely for this because I can just make videos from it. But realistically, is quite a big buff for what I don't think are any downsides. And that could be fine. People could want that. I don't necessarily want that, just because I don't want the game to become unrecognizable, is my main thing. Now, what about the prayers in PvP? I know what you're thinking. That looks absolutely insane. However, I'd suggest that the prayers actually have a better balance in PvP than they do in PvM. There are positives and negatives rather than just positives. In max strength, using the new prayer Annihilate, I can hit a 90 with an AGS. This is in comparison to the old prayer book where I use Piety. I can hit an 87. That's 3 extra max hits. But all those other max hits to get to 99 comes from the opponent using the wrong Dampened prayer. You get a good reward for using Decimate in a few more max hits, but a significant downside and increased risk using the Dampened prayers, which means you could get smacked out of nowhere. And remember, we've got the Void Waker now, the AGS. You can't necessarily get the right prayer a lot of the time, so that's going to be spicy. Whether you think this is good for PvP or not depends on whether you think that more people dying is good. I'm generally on the side of more chaos is better. This is a strength-heavy setup, which is sort of a medium risk setup for the wilderness that people tend to use, and I can AGS in 82 with Piety. If I spec that on somebody that's using the new prayer book, that turns into a 90 because it's 10%. A 90, that is pretty big. And then if I use the new prayer book on somebody who has the wrong prayer on in this middle risk gear, that is going to be a 93, which is pretty insane. And then if we look at the Void Waker here, someone using the new prayer book is going to get hit for a 83 max with a Void Waker there. As for edge style fighting, obviously all of these offensive prayers means you can hit higher, and Rebuke means that your recoils and vengeances hit 50% more, which is honestly pretty big. So yeah, PvP meta definitely got a bit more dangerous, that's for sure. But you can use the normal prayer book and you'll only have to suffer the increased max hits of like 2 or 3 from this prayer book. So I think it's fairly balanced. Yeah, a lot of people are going to die for max. So in summary, for PvM, I think you should vote yes if you want a large DPS increase, you like how prayers already are, and you're not too worried about the power creep. Maybe vote no if you're like uninspired by the new prayers. You think they're too similar to the past. The thing is, they're similar to the old prayer book, and for some people that's good, for some people that's bad. I'm on the side of, I think it's a lot of power creep at once, so makes me a bit cautious. As for PvP, if you want to have a high risk, high reward shake-up, go for it. I'm looking for, if it passes, I'm looking forward to seeing it in PvP because it's gonna be pretty crazy. Make sure you're subscribed. Fumus's Vow. Attacks that inflict poison cause poison to trigger damage immediately. Dragon Dagger P++. Am I using this wrong? I don't get what am I supposed to be doing?